Night descended upon Constantinople softly, like a velvet curtain. Somewhere in the distance the wind howled, echoing the cries of seagulls, but over the old quarter, where the French embassy was located, silence reigned, a silence full of tension, as it happens before a storm or a death sentence. The embassy room still breathed with the day's bustle, fruit bowls left on the table, unchessmen by the fireplace. But in one of the bedrooms, in a room with tall windows and lace curtains, no one slept anymore. There recently lay a girl, 12-year-old Laurence d'Albet, daughter of the French ambassador to the court of Sultan Mahmud. The room preserved her presence, as if she had simply stepped out for a moment. A lace handkerchief with an embroidered letter L still lay on the pillow. The air carried the delicate scent of jasmine and frankincense, and on the wooden floor, light traces of bare feet. But the girl had vanished. No sound, no scream, no trace. The guard, as always, slept at the gates. The servants heard nothing. The ambassador raised the alarm only in the morning, when the governess did not find Lawrence at the morning lesson. The guard combed the surroundings, checked the harbor, questioned the merchants. In response, only shrugs, only fear. No one knew anything, or pretended not to know. That night, Constantinople breathed with spices, heat, and politics. Everything was fragile, everything could explode, and the ambassador, a wise and weary man, made a decision that broke his life. He ordered silence. Lawrence was kidnapped, but France could not allow a diplomatic scandal. In official papers, she was sent for treatment in Europe. The embassy curtained the windows. Furniture from her room was taken away. Only the old doorkeeper swore until his death that on that night he saw a black palanquin disappearing toward the palace, and heard how the girl called someone, barely audibly, as if in a dream, "Maman." And in the Sultan's harem the next day, a new concubine appeared. She did not cry, did not scream, did not beg. She simply sat, curled in a ball, with an empty gaze fixed on the patterned wall. They took away her name, took away her dress, took away her voice. Now she was called Nurhan. The older concubines, Turkish women, Circassians, Greeks, looked at her with wariness. There was something non-harem about her. Not foreign, on the contrary, too free. When one of the women approached to teach her to bow, the girl did not react. When she stood over her with a rod, Laurence raised her eyes for the first time. She looked silently, long, directly, as one does not look in the harem. The servants whispered, "This girl has the gaze of a snake, not angry, cold, not desperate, indifferent, like those who already live on the other side." Several weeks passed. The girl was washed, dressed, entered into the lists. She ate every other day, spoke not a word, but listened to everything, absorbed everything. And at this time, somewhere behind the palace walls, in a dusty box among papers, lay a handkerchief with an embroidered letter, L. Chapter 2. The Girl from Another World. Lessons in the harem began at dawn. Court tutors taught the concubines dances, graceful walk, writing, the manner of laughing correctly, not loudly, not vulgarly, but so that it seemed like air. The girls were prepared like porcelain, to bend but not break, to shine but not eclipse the Sultan's light. But one of them did not shine, and did not break. Nurhan did not dance, did not answer questions, did not repeat verses after the teacher. She simply sat by the window, aside, silently, as if she were here only in body, her head inclined to her knees, hair tangled in a knot, and in her fingers, a corner of parchment, All day she wrote thin scrawls on it. Lines and paragraphs, spirals and signs, not in Arabic, not in Ottoman. The head tutor initially wanted to tear out the sheet, but then only shrugged her shoulders. Crazy, or too spoiled by European upbringing, such ones don't live long, or quickly become obedient. The servants chattered by the well, "She's not healthy, something's wrong with her." One said that at night she heard the girl laughing alone, another that Nurhan talks to a doll that has no eyes. Someone swore they saw her kneeling before the wall and whispering something in French, and no one understood whether she was praying or cursing. But among the harem women there was one who didn't believe in nonsense. Her name was Salima. She was over 40. She had lived under 3 sultans. She had seen how girls come, with eyes full of tears and hopes, and then disappear, with faces without expression. She knew the harem breaks those who want to be loved, but is powerless against those who don't want to be anyone. Salima did not ask. She observed and saw. The girl heard everything. When the teacher whispered verses, the corner of Nurhan's lips trembled, as if she was reciting them to herself. When the tutor scolded one of the concubines, Nurhan's fingers clenched into a fist. She was not deaf. She simply chose when and with whom to be alive. Once, in the hour of heat, Salima approached her, not with a threat, not with an order. She simply sat nearby and asked, "Do you understand me?" Nurhan did not answer, did not look, but the pen in her hand trembled, and a new line appeared on the sheet. In French, small, almost invisible, "I'm waiting for them to retreat." Salima said nothing, only nodded, then got up and left, and in the evening ordered more food and a warm shawl brought to the girl. The servants didn't understand. The other women were outraged. But Salima knew. This girl was not from this world. She came from another, but did not surrender to it. She doesn't stay silent from fear. She speaks inside, just not to everyone. Several more days passed. One morning in the harem library, Salima slipped a book under Nurhan's pillow, a French collection of ancient poetry. No one noticed. But the next day Nurhan was writing again, and in the lines there was no longer fear, only rhythm, strength. She wrote like one who knows, truth comes not with voice, but with silence. Chapter 3. The Glass Gaze. In the harem it was not customary to look into the eyes. Everyone knew this, from the youngest concubines to the oldest eunuchs. Gaze down, submission in the body, silence in the voice, 3 golden rules of life behind the barred windows of the palace. But she did not look down. Nurhan, or Lawrence, as she was called in another life, did not curtsy, did not bow her head, and did not shower gratitude for another piece of Turkish delight. She simply sat, as if transparent, as if she were a ghost remaining among the living, or a foreign memory frozen in a body. And this could not remain unnoticed. Sultan Mahmud, a man with the face of a weary scholar and the eyes of a hunter, rarely paid attention to new concubines. He was bored by soft beauty and silk bows. He was drawn to silence, to strangeness, to the non-obvious. And when his chief eunuch, trembling, reported that among the new girls there was one mute but frighteningly gazing, the Sultan became interested. "Mute?" he asked, looking out the window. "From birth?" "No, sovereign, they say after the kidnapping. She hasn't uttered a word." "And how does she look?" "Directly, as if she doesn't see you, but through." 3 days later she was brought to the morning inspection. He stood in the shadow of a marble colonnade, in half light, dressed simply, white shirt, dark robe. The concubines stood in a row, bowed low, kept their eyes on the floor. Except one. She stood last, straight, thin, face pale, lips compressed, hands down along her body. And her gaze, like a ray of cold light, not defiant, not challenging, but absolutely uncontrollable. Their eyes met. The Sultan did not retreat, but something trembled inside. In this gaze there was neither fear nor submission, only boundless, icy detachment. As if she already knew how it would all end, and it was all the same to her. He walked past without saying a word, but in the evening he called the eunuch and asked, "Who is she?" "A Frenchwoman, sovereign. They say the ambassador's daughter, kidnapped or gifted. Now she is Nurhan." "Why doesn't she speak?" "They say she lost her voice. Psychological shock." The Sultan was silent for a long time, and then, as if in passing, asked, "Does she sleep peacefully?" "No one knows, but they say at night she whispers." He squinted. "Whispers?" "Yes, sovereign. Sometimes in French, sometimes as if verses, and laughs, quietly, as if from afar." The next morning Nurhan was moved to other quarters, more spacious, closer to the library, and with a balcony overlooking the Bosphorus. No one explained to her why, but she understood. He had begun to observe, and she allowed it. Chapter 4. The Words Spoken at Night. The harem lived by its own hours: morning prayers, daytime silence, evening preparations for a possible visit from the Sultan, and night. Dark as an ink trail on a scroll, filled with breathing, rustling, and the shadow of something unsaid. In these hours, servants hid under blankets, trying not to hear someone crying in the next room. Eunuchs dozed, leaning against door frames, and Lawrence, now named Nurhan, did not sleep. She sat by the window, looked at the flickering lights over the Bosphorus, at ships in the distance, at peace that was inaccessible to her, and sometimes whispered, very quietly, so that it was almost a breath, almost breathing. That night servant Aisha, passing by her door, stopped. At first it seemed to her someone was singing. But listening closely, she understood. The girl was speaking, not loudly, not distinctly, but clearly. One word. "Maman." Aisha paled. She knew what this meant. Too many years at court, too many rumors. She leaned closer to the door, held her breath, but the voice fell silent. Only a light laugh, as if not the girl, the night itself, laughed at her. In the morning, the eunuch learned about this. By midday, Salima, and by evening, the Sultan. He said nothing, only made one seemingly insignificant gesture. "Bring her to the library," he said quietly. "I want to see what she chooses." The library was special, not women's, men's, closed. There were no books on etiquette, silk albums with embroidery, or collections of fairy tales. There were treatises on astronomy, philosophy, poetry. There, where thoughts did not obey the laws of the harem. Nurhan entered without escort. The Sultan watched from another hall, through a carved lattice. He was in no hurry to appear. He was studying. She walked past the shelves, stopped. Her fingers froze at the spines, as if guessing by touch where was the very one, and pulled out 2 volumes. One, Muqaddimah, by Ibn Khaldun, in Arabic. The second, a volume of French poetry from the 17th century. She sat on the floor, opened both, turned pages unhurriedly, not for show. She read, attentively, deeply. In her lips, slight movement, as if she was repeating every word to herself. Sometimes she smiled, not with expression, only with her eyes. The Sultan did not approach, did not call. He simply watched. A servant asked, "Sovereign, did she recognize you?" The Sultan did not answer immediately, only after a pause. "She evaluated me." "And what will you say?" He smirked. "I will say that this girl did not break. She looks, she absorbs, she waits." He left without giving another order. But in the evening, ink, clean paper, and a new pillow were brought to her quarters, embroidered with gold threads. In the corner, the same letter, only not L, but Arabic nen, noon, the beginning of her new name. Nurhan took the pen and wrote the first line, in 2 languages, in 2 worlds, for herself. Chapter 5. Dance Without Body. Music in the harem sounded every evening, light, spicy, like the scent of rose oil on the hem of a dress. Sounds of saz and oud, soft beats of tambourine, rustle of skirts and ring of bracelets. All this, not for pleasure. It was a performance, beautiful, seductive, calculated. A theater in which each concubine was actress and decoration simultaneously. And this evening, everything should have been as always. The harem was preparing for a closed reception. The Sultan was going to visit the Mirror Pavilion, a special room where walls reflected every movement in hundreds of glimmers. There he watched the dances of concubines, not with eyes but with multiple reflections. He loved distortions, loved to see beauty not directly, but through prism and light. Nurhan knew. Her name was on the list of performers. She was warned in advance. They brought a costume, served perfumes. She accepted everything. Everything. Except the main thing. She did not come out. While dancers whirled in the mirrored hall, under vaults studded with golden drops, she sat by the window, looked at the night Bosphorus. Music reached her quarters as if through water. She did not close her ears. She was simply quieter than this music. In the hall, the Sultan silently observed. He waited. Everyone knew. He was waiting for her. In every figure he sought that very thing, what he had already seen in her motionless gaze, in lines in 2 languages, in silence full of meaning. But she did not come out. And the whole performance, despite the artistry, despite the efforts, was empty. Beautiful, but without center. Like painting without fresco. Like music without motif. The Sultan did not watch to the end. He rose, silently, without remarks, without gratitude, and left. In the harem, this was almost a scandal. He did not leave, not once, in 10 years. Tutors, in panic. Eunuchs, in bewilderment. Dancers, in tears. Someone whispered that Nurhan was to blame, that her pride was like poison, that she was dangerous, that she was a sorceress. But no one dared say this aloud, not with Salima there, not with the elders. Because this evening something inexplicable happened. 2 girls who danced in the place reserved for Nurhan, during the performance, fell simultaneously, as if someone had erased their support. One of them broke her wrist. The other lost consciousness. The Sultan saw this, but did not stop. He simply left, casting a glance at the empty corner of the stage, where she should have been. And at this time she was writing, on the windowsill, by moonlight, with black ink, without decorations, without dance. And yet behind her stretched a shadow, thin, long, like behind a melody that cannot be heard, but that leads without words. Chapter 6. Heart written in ink. Night in the Sultan's quarters always began the same way. Extinguishing of lamps, click of door locks, rustle of steps in the corridor. Everything familiar, measured, like the breathing of a sleeping beast. No one entered without summons. No one dared disturb the sovereign's peace. But that night, something changed. When he returned from the pavilion, irritated, silent, a letter already lay on his pillow, folded without seal, the paper thick, French, with a light scent of musk and rose oil. The Sultan glanced at the letter with cold interest, opened it, and immediately understood. This was not a request, not a denunciation, not a game. This was an address, from a person who was not afraid to be heard. The lines were clear, drawn confidently, as if not by the hand of a concubine, but by the hand of a poetess. Word by word, alive, cold, direct. You can lock up the body, but the mind will remain outside. My name is Nurhan, but my name is Lawrence. I was born in a house where they spoke quietly, but thought loudly. Here I am silent, because your world loves those who are quiet. But I do not belong to it. I am between east and west, between your shadow and my light. I do not seek pity, I do not seek salvation. I simply remind, even in a cage, the heart continues to beat. Even in silence, the mind speaks. There was no signature, but he recognized the handwriting. It was her. The Sultan read the letter twice, slowly. Not a muscle moved in his face, but inside, something swayed. Not offense, not anger, but a strange, almost forgotten feeling, to meet an equal, not by position, not by power, but by essence. This letter did not ask, it looked into the eyes. It did not plead, it asserted. Each line, like the strike of a thin dagger, precise, verified, without hatred, but with pain, cold and deep. He sat for a long time. The letter lay on the table, spread out like an open palm. Outside the window stretched the Bosphorus. Blind and indifferent to what was happening in the palace, he remembered her gaze, remembered the silence in the library, remembered how she did not come out on stage, and the whole hall fell silent in her absence. The Sultan called a eunuch. Who else knows about this letter? No one, sovereign. So let it remain, burn it, but first make a copy. Personally. Sovereign, why? He did not answer, because even he did not know why he wanted to keep words that were impossible to forget. Words in which there was no caress, but there was strength. That which does not belong to concubines. That which is impossible to buy, order, or extinguish. This is not how a slave writes. This is not how a mistress writes. This is how an equal writes. Chapter 7. Smile Through the Lattice. This meeting did not happen in the hall, not at a reception, not in the light of lamps and rustle of silk. It happened in the old garden behind the library, in a place where almost no one went. There wild roses and mint bloomed, and the air was heavy with damp earth and memory. Nurhan sat by the fountain, barefoot in a simple dress. Her hair was loose, fingers stained with ink. Before her, paper, a piece of pomegranate, and a broken pen. She was not writing, she was waiting. He came alone, without guard, without warning, not in a royal robe, but in the simple clothing of a scholar, a long tunic and worn belt. He stood in the shadows, saying nothing, and looked for a long time. She did not raise her head. She knew who it was. He approached closer, silently, then sat on a bench opposite. Between them, the garden lattice, old, rusted, like a line dividing two worlds. He looked through it, at her face, and asked, "Why are you here?" She was silent for a long time, then slowly answered, in French, "Because you wanted this." He smirked, for the first time, not in mockery, not in weariness. Sincerely, easily, almost humanly. "So I decide everything?" he asked. She nodded. "Always. You simply don't always understand this." They were silent. In the garden, cicadas sang. Somewhere behind the wall, water rang. He leaned closer. "You've changed," he said. "I became quieter," she answered. "I would like to have known you before," he said. "Before all this." She did not answer, only looked. And in this gaze was everything: bitterness, weariness, longing, understanding that time cannot be returned, that you cannot meet in the past if you are already enemies in the present. "What do you see when you look at me?" he asked suddenly. "A lattice," she said. He froze, then stood, walked past, ran his fingers along the metal, slowly, like along a string. "Do you think I put it there?" "I think you don't take it down," she answered. He smirked again, but this time, sadly, like one who understood, but too late. "We could have been allies," he said. "We are," she whispered. "But through a wall." He did not argue, simply watched as the wind stirred her hair, then left without looking back. And even his steps were inaudible. And she remained. Her eyes expressed no triumph, only peace, like one who understood. He was not a monster. He was a man, but a man who came too late. And at this moment she allowed herself to smile, just a little, through the lattice, not at him, not at herself, but at time, which bound them as enemies. Chapter 8. Whisper behind the wall. In the palace, silence is rare, but in those weeks it became especially ominous. In the audience halls, tension. In the corridors, whisper. In the harem, hidden fear. Nurhan's name no longer sounded loudly, but was everywhere. It passed between the lines of letters, in intonations, in glances. The advisors were troubled. "She knows too much," said the Grand Vizier. "She doesn't stay silent from submissiveness. She chooses whom to speak to. And that's dangerous." "France suspects something," echoed the foreign minister. "We receive inquiries. They're looking for a girl matching the description." "This could become a scandal," said the Mufti. "A woman from the West who influenced the sovereign? This violates order. The harem is not a place for ideas." The Sultan was silent, listened, but did not agree. He did not release her. He did not exile her to a province, did not send her to a monastery, did not return her to France. He gave her a room, separate, spacious, overlooking the Bosphorus, with a balcony from where one could see ships departing, where the wind smelled of salt, freedom, and something that could not be expressed in Ottoman. Servants said. She began to speak again, not loudly, not with others, but to herself, with books, with paper, and in French. The old eunuch once approached closer to the door and heard, "If I had been born in another city, if I had not awakened that night, if you had not come, if you knew that I remember every crack in the embassy ceiling." He left the door, in silence. Then said to Salima, "She didn't surrender. She's simply waiting for us to leave." And indeed, Nurhan became different. She no longer looked like a prisoner. She dressed like a concubine, but walked like a guest. She ate from golden bowls, but drank water as if from a stream. And when she walked through the corridor, no one dared call out to her. They didn't fear her. They didn't understand her. And that was more frightening. Rumors reached Europe. They wrote, "In the Sultan's palace appeared a woman with eyes of ice and the tongue of a poet." Newspapers did not name names, but spoke of a French girl who disappeared under mysterious circumstances. The Sultan read these lines. He knew, sooner or later, he would have to answer. But for now, he observed. He came at dawn, stood by the balcony, and watched as she wrote, how she rearranged books, how without looking at him she spoke, only into space. "Someday you'll release me anyway, but not because you'll want to, but because I'll leave." He didn't ask when, didn't ask where. He simply remained, because her voice, her whisper behind the wall, was the only thing in the palace that didn't ask, didn't flatter, didn't plead. It reminded of the fact that there is a woman who doesn't ask for freedom. She carries it inside. Chapter 9, Brooch on the Pillow. Death in the Sultan's palace always comes quietly, without screams, without panic. First, incomprehensible bustle at the entrance, then, closed doors, after, black fabrics on windows, and only then, announcement to the world. The empire was left without a voice. Sultan Mahmud died suddenly. No one expected it. He was not ill. He did not complain. He only became more silent, more thoughtful. More and more often he looked at the water, and less at people. They said the day before he did not come out of his quarters for a long time. Servants saw how he ordered candles removed, curtains closed, to be left alone. No concubines, no music, not even a personal scribe. Only he and the night. And in the morning they found the body. Lying on his back, hands on chest, face, peaceful, almost serene, as if not pain but liberation had come to him. But there was one detail that did not fit the usual order. On his chest lay a brooch, small, of old French gold, fine work, in the shape of the letter L, intertwined with a curl. On the reverse side, an almost worn inscription, LDA. Not one of the courtiers knew where it came from. Not one concubine had ever worn such jewelry. The Sultan had never mentioned it once, but it lay there, like a seal, like a last will. The eunuchs exchanged glances. The advisors were silent. The servant who removed the brooch said later, "It was warm," as if he had held it all night. Nurhan disappeared that same day. No traces, no investigations. Only one of the guards swore that he saw how, under cover of dusk from the secret western exit, came a woman, in a black veil, without servants, without baggage, her whole caravan, 3 riders and a camel. She did not turn back, did not stop, and disappeared in the direction of Bursa. Others said, no, she left by sea. A third insisted that she died that same night, poisoning herself. All rumors were equally vague. The harem was quickly filled with new faces. Rooms were renamed, books were removed. But one thing remained. On the writing desk in the library, where she loved to sit, lay a sheet of paper. Empty, almost. Only at the bottom, a thin line. In French, but in handwriting that all who had the honor of reading her thoughts already knew. Le cœur ne se donne pas, il se reprend. The heart is not given away, it is taken back. the Sultan was buried with honors. The brooch was placed in his hand. No one dared ask whose it was. It became a secret, too personal, too strong. And then music played again in the palace. Curtains opened, concubines sang. But in the western room, where the wind brought the smell of the sea, no one lived anymore. And only the evening light, falling on the empty pillow, sometimes reminded someone was here, someone who belonged to nothing, not even to time. Chapter 10. Woman Without Homeland. In the palace archives, her name is not listed. In official records, she is not numbered among concubines, nor among servants, nor among honorary exiles. In the lists of gifts from foreign embassies, there is also no mention of a girl from France, as if she had never been. The story of Laurence d'Albet is emptiness outlined by traces. Strange orders from the Sultan, disappearance of letters, sudden closure of the library for reconstruction, then silence and whisper. In the harem, they did not remember her aloud. Only Salima, the old tutor, in her last years of life, spoke with an anxious note, as if about a ghost. After her, everything became quieter, as if someone blew out a candle. But warmth remained. And then Salima died. And then left the vizier who once demanded Nurhan's elimination. And the very world in which she was known left. Only shadow remained. But in Paris, in one of the old libraries on the left bank of the Seine, in a hall where light rarely enters, stands a cabinet. There, among forgotten manuscripts, is hidden a leather volume without author. On the spine there is no name, only a line drawn in ink. Letters of she who breathes between lines. The pages inside, yellowed, with the smell of salt and spices. Each letter, like a piece of dream. No dates, no events, only breathing and images. Sometimes in the letters it sounds as if a woman writes from a cage. Sometimes, as if she speaks from inside the palace itself. And sometimes, as if she writes already dead. I was both foreign and my own, and nobody, and the center of the world. I was a woman between two shores. If freedom were a sound, it would sound like breathing before a phrase. I do not fear being a forgotten name. I fear being a foreign voice in a foreign story. Scholars argue who the author is. Some consider that the letters are fiction, others that it's a trace of a mysterious captive. But none of them can explain why in every text one feels the smell of the sea, hears the murmur of water, and as if hears a step on the marble floor of an old harem. And somewhere in one of the Ottoman archives is kept a scrap of paper, a letter from the Sultan himself, without date, without address. And it is written not in Arabic, but in French. I did not forgive you, but did not forget either. You did not defeat me, you left me empty, and that's worse. Empires crumble, cities change names, stories are lost. But since that very night when she disappeared, not one harem captive looked into the Sultan's eyes with such challenge anymore. And no one left like that, in silence that sounds louder than words. So she remained, a woman without homeland, without name, but with breathing that lives between lines.